Time has long been a favorite subject of philosophers, like a mystery wrapped in the very essence of existence. And the deeper they looked, the deeper the mystery became. So what is time really? We live by it, we measure our lives in hours, minutes, deadlines, birthdays. But time, at least in the way we experience it today, is a modern invention. Linear time, mechanical time, objective time, these are ideas shaped by industry, not by nature. Ancient cultures, especially those rooted in esoteric and occult traditions, saw time differently. So let's talk about that. I want to take you on a kind of journey, not through time, but into time. And I'll be honest, no matter how much I try to simplify this, it might still get complicated. So this will either make me or break me. In Hermeticism, in the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, in the early Neoplatonist and Gnostic writings, time was a spiritual architecture, a pattern, a cycle, a force that shaped consciousness and connected the physical world to the divine. Thinkers like Plato, Plotinus, Iamblichus, and later alchemists and Kabbalists all saw time as something more complex. In many occult systems, time is cyclical, not a straight line from past to future, but a great wheel, turning and returning. In ancient Egypt, time was divided into two concepts. Ne, which is cyclical and regenerative time, like the sun rising again and again, and Jet, or Diet, the linear and eternal time of the gods. And rituals were designed to keep Ne in balance, to ensure that the cosmic order, or Mahat, was upheld. In Greece, Plato wrote in his dialogue Timaeus that time is the moving image of eternity. For Plato, the cosmos is tailored by a divine artisan, the demiurge, who brings order to chaos. Time, then, is a kind of mirror of eternity, born when the heavens began to move in cycles. And this idea influenced Hermeticism, so the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, reveals how the movements of stars and seasons reflect the soul's own journey through inner transformation. And one of the most enduring symbols of this cosmic cycle is the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail. It appears in Egyptian tombs, in Greek magical texts, and later in alchemical manuscripts. It represents eternal return, the idea that all things rise and fall, die, and are reborn. So not just seasons and empires, but souls. And in this worldview, time is a pattern to align with, not a clock to race against. Now, if time had a face in the occult world, it would be Saturn, as I have mentioned in my previous video. In Roman mythology, Saturn was the god of time, agriculture, and endings. But in occult traditions, especially astrology, Hermeticism, and the Kabbalah, Saturn takes on a deeper symbolic role. Saturn is Kronos, the devourer of his own children. He represents limitation, structure, boundaries, and decay. Everything that reminds us that time is finite, at least in the material world. But here lies the key, as Saturn is also the initiator, not just a grim reaper. In Kabbalistic mysticism, Saturn corresponds to the Sphira Bina on the tree of life, the sphere of understanding, but also of restriction. Bina is the womb of form, where pure energy is shaped into reality. So yes, Saturn limits, but in doing so, he gives form to the formless. Astrologers speak of a person's Saturn return, the period around ages 28 to 30 when Saturn comes back to the position it occupied at one's birth. It is a time of reckoning, maturity, and confronting own limitations. In Hermetic thought, this moment marks the start of true spiritual adulthood. Saturn teaches us that time is a test, and it is through enduring time's weight, through responsibility, patience, and the acceptance of endings, the soul becomes ready for higher initiation. We can think of Saturn as the gatekeeper of wisdom, the one who helps us grow into who we are really meant to be. Now, let me briefly touch on how time is measured in astrology. So the Chaldeans and later the Arabians were really focused on how time plays out through the movement of the planets and stars. They laid the foundation for a lot what we still use in astrology today. For example, a symbolic timing method used in modern astrology is called secondary progressions, where each day after birth represents 1 year of life, and it became a way to track how time unfolds on a more symbolic level. And though it came long after the Hellenistic period, it shows the ancient desire to connect celestial cycles with personal growth. Now, astrologers use secondary progressions to see how the sky keeps moving with you, not just around you, and to make sense of the timing of important life events. And even today, I think it's one of the most popular tools in astrology because it gives such a personal view of how we grow and change over time. You probably heard of the Placidus house system. It's actually one of the most commonly used systems in modern astrology, and it was developed by Placido Titi or Placidus de Titus, a 17th century astrologer who based his method not on equal slices of space, but on time. So he developed a house system that divides the sky based on time, specifically the time it takes for degrees of the ecliptic to rise, culminate, and set. In this method, the positions of the ascendant and midheaven anchor the chart to the Earth's rotation, and the houses are calculated by dividing the time it takes for celestial points to move across the sky. Unlike systems that divide space, Placidus focuses on the temporal arcs of planetary motion, making it one of the most conceptually time-sensitive house systems in astrology. So again, the idea is that instead of dividing the sky into 12 equal sections, Placidus looked at how long it takes a point on the zodiac, like a degree of the ecliptic, to rise over the horizon, reach the midheaven, and then set. And that journey is called a semiarch, and the system divides that time into segments to create the house cusps. So it's really about tracking how celestial points move through time, not just through space. The ascendant and midheaven still anchor the chart, but what makes Placidus unique is that it ties the houses directly to the Earth's rotation and the rhythm of time unfolding at the moment of birth. Of course, this is just a brief overview. There are many other methods and complexities in astrological timing, but for today, this will serve as a foundation. And just to add, when I first started studying astrology many moons ago, Placidus was the system I used. I later switched to equal and whole sign house systems, but that is a story for another video. So historically, some astrologers tried to predict the timing of death by carefully studying planetary progressions and their effects on what's called the high leg, the vital life force in astrology. For example, if a malefic or harsh planet like Saturn or Mars formed difficult aspects to the high leg, it was seen as a warning sign. But this path is filled with uncertainty and raises some ethical concerns. William Lilly warned against making exact death predictions. And why? Well, because death isn't always fixed. It can be delayed or altered by living well, by clear thinking, spiritual growth, or the wisdom we gain. For instance, someone might have a tough Saturn transit, but by facing their challenges with courage and responsibility, they can soften its impact, perhaps extending their life or changing their fate. Still, many people seem to follow their star schedules, moving with the natural flow of their birth chart patterns, sometimes lightly, sometimes with struggle. Now, if you want to explore this sensitive topic, the right way involves looking at the relationship between the high leg and the anareta, a somewhat complex technique requiring the exact time of birth. And this is where horary astrology, the astrology of specific moments, comes in handy. Raphael, a 19th century astrologer, and William Lilly both wrote extensively about these methods. Many ancient systems viewed time as something internal, closely linked to memory, consciousness, and ritual. For instance, the Corpus Hermeticum, a foundational text in Western esotericism, begins with poimandres. Now, this term is believed to originate from an Egyptian phrase meaning knowledge or understanding of re, although some other sources say that, as it was originally written in Greek, it translates to man shepherd. Now, in this context, the divine mind unveils an alternative conception of time. It is not a time we usually think of, seconds, minutes, or hours. It is something more akin to what Platonic philosophy calls the image of eternity, so a symbolic unfolding of divine order rather than clock time. And while that's not a direct quote, it captures the essence that time is a kind of a way for the eternal to unfold into the world we experience. Now, in the 3rd century CE, the Neoplatonist philosopher Plotinus took this idea further. Now, he was building on Plato's line that time is the moving image of eternity and emphasized that time doesn't exist independently, it is tied to the soul's perception. Now, Plotinus suggested that time flows because we remember the past and anticipate the future. So time is connected to consciousness itself. It is a part of our inner experience, shaped by how we see things, what we remember, and what we expect from the future. Occult practitioners, especially those involved in theurgy, this is a ritual aimed at divine union, sought to collapse ordinary time. The philosopher Iamblichus taught that through ritual, the practitioner transcends linear time and participates in divine eternity. The sacred moment becomes timeless, a portal where past, present, and future merge. Gnostic traditions go beyond, portraying time as a prison, a veil of illusion created by lesser powers, trapping the divine spark within material limitation. And still, through Gnosis, the spiritual knowledge, the initiate awakens beyond time, accessing the pleroma, or the fullness, or in this context, fullness of eternal truth. So in magic and mysticism, time is a medium to be mastered, and memory, ritual, and sacred knowledge allow the practitioner to slip through the veil, stepping outside of ordinary time's flow. So what does all this ancient wisdom about time mean for us today? Philosophically, the occult traditions tell us to see time as a living process through which the soul evolves. Time is both a teacher and a test. It challenges us with limitations, Saturn's lessons, but it also opens the possibility of awakening. Practically, this means we can begin to shift our relationship with time. Instead of being caught in the endless rush of schedules and deadlines, we can possibly recognize that time unfolds in cycles, moments of growth, rest, and transformation. Like the ancient Magi who timed their rituals to celestial movements, we too can attune ourselves to natural rhythms, be they lunar, seasonal, or personal. Additionally, through practices like ritual, meditation, and reflection, we can enter those timeless moments, the points where past and future dissolve, and only the present remains, as these are the moments where insight, creativity, and connection with the deeper self arise. At its core, time is the idea of succession, an unfolding of states or events perceived by our consciousness. Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, the practical and poetic founder of Theosophy, described time as a kind of unfolding panorama of states of consciousness. And while she didn't put it exactly like that, this grasps her idea that time is really about how our awareness shifts and changes through different experiences. Compared to some very abstract or symbolic takes on time, Blavatsky's view is surprisingly down to earth. She shows us that when we talk about time as the impression of one thing following another, we are actually touching on a deep truth about how our minds work. To sense that one thing comes after another, to feel time, something in us has to stay still. There has to be a steady center that notices change. So time isn't just movement or change itself, but the way we experience it. In other words, time shows up whenever things shift or evolve. It's how we track the distance between events, the flow from one moment to the next. But the only way we can do that is by having some kind of inner reference point that doesn't move. You could say that part of us, the quiet observer, is what allows us to notice change at all. Without that steady awareness, we wouldn't even know time was passing. And that idea shows up in a lot of spiritual and philosophical traditions, the sense that something deep within us stays still, even while everything around us changes. It seems that time is not just a concept we observe. It may in fact be one of the cardinal functions of the soul itself, perhaps even its primal function. Because time is to the soul what space is to the body. We might even say time is the distilled essence of space. Just as space arises between the physical self and what lies outside it, the bodily not-self, so too does time arise between the soul's own internal polarity, the self and the not-self within. On one side, we find the abstract, the spiritual, on the other, the concrete, the material. And between these two poles of being, time emerges as a kind of metaphysical distance, a measurement of relation between spirit and matter, between essence and form. Time, in this sense, becomes a lived reality for the soul, just as space is a lived reality for the body. This idea can be found in certain strands of Hindu cosmology and interpreted in theosophical writings like in Elena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. Taking on texts like the Puranas, these interpretations speak of Brahma, the cosmic creator, as associated with three foundational principles: Purusha, spirit or consciousness; Prakriti, primordial matter; and Kal, time. And while this triad is not a formal doctrine in classical Hindu philosophy, it shows a metaphysical insight that time is an essential structure through which spirit and matter become meaningful in relation to each other. So in this view, time is foundational, not secondary. In many traditions, both time and the soul are represented by the same image, the serpent. Winding, spiraling, shedding its skin, the serpent speaks to continuity and change, death and rebirth, eternity coiled within the moment. It is a living symbol of the soul's journey through the cycles of time. And since we measure time by motion, and practically speaking by movement through states, we must recognize that there are two kinds of measurement, one objective and the other subjective. Objectively, we measure time by external rhythms, the turning of the earth, the ticking of a clock, the transit of a planet. But subjectively, we measure time by the motion of our own consciousness, especially through our astral awareness. Inwardly, we are always either moving toward a future state or quietly absorbed in the present one. When the present moment satisfies us, we have little sense of time at all. We usually say, time flew by. Why? Because we felt no need to move, no desire pulling us forward. There was no inner motion and so no measurement. But when we are caught in a situation we long to escape, when we are yearning for some future release, we begin to move inwardly toward that imagined state. And that movement makes time feel heavy, long, and slow. We say time is dragging. But it is not time itself that has changed, it's our experience of motion. A minute can stretch into what feels like an hour when we are in pain, waiting for a toothache to pass, or in anticipation, longing for something just out of reach. But time contracts, even disappears when we are absorbed in work, in joy, in love, in creative flow. There is no imagined future in those moments, no projection forward, no movement, just being. And so, time dissolves. And this is even more apparent in sleep. In sleep, our connection to the physical world and the idea of movement within it vanishes, and with it, the experience of time. Consciousness, as it relates to waking motion, is suspended in sleep, and so, for all intents and purposes, time is eliminated. But this raises deeper questions, because time behaves strangely in altered states of consciousness, in trance, hypnosis, dreams, mediumship, or in clairvoyance. It becomes uncertain. Take, for instance, findings from hypnotic experiments. The subconscious mind usually demonstrates a remarkable ability to estimate time with surprising accuracy, even when the conscious mind is unaware or dissociated, and this precision has been observed repeatedly. And so when such timing fails to appear in certain trance communications, it raises an interesting possibility. If a communicator speaking through a hypnotic subject or medium were simply a secondary personality or a subconscious fragment, we would expect this time sense to still be intact. But when it is not, when the sense of time completely breaks down, some have taken this as evidence that the speaker is not a fragment of the self, but perhaps, for a lack of a better word, a foreign or alien entity, a bodiless spirit. And yet, even if that's true, why do spirits, if they are spirits, seem to lose their grip on time as we know it? No one can say for certain, but it appears that in the non-physical realms, time and space follow different laws, or perhaps different geometries. And one example comes from a medium who gave a detailed description through trance of a house belonging to a man thought to be missing. Now, at the time, the description didn't match any known location. But months later, after the man reappeared, it was discovered that the house described matched perfectly with his new home, which he moved into a year later. A vision, sure, but of what? A clairvoyant glimpse into the future, a moment out of sequence? Now, this uncertainty of temporal reference is common in clairvoyance. The seer may witness events unfolding vividly, but not know if they belong to the past, the present, or the future. So time becomes fluid. It no longer runs in a straight line, it begins to spiral and to fold, and in such states our ordinary distinctions blur. So what was, what is, and what will be may be seen all at once. Take Dionysius the Areopagite, a Christian Neoplatonist whose mystical writings influenced medieval and Renaissance occultism. He taught that the divine exists beyond all time and space. His work laid the foundation for rituals designed to transcend ordinary time, something central to many esoteric paths. And then there's Meister Eckhart, a medieval Dominican theologian and writer, a mystic who described those rare, profound moments when time seems to dissolve and the soul touches the eternal. These and many other thinkers show us that time is something very much connected to our spiritual experience. Time's kind of a mystery, isn't it? It's always with us, shaping everything, yet still just out of reach. As I wrap up this video, I want to ask you, how are you going to meet time today? Like an enemy to fight, or more like a teacher to learn from? Because really, time isn't just something we move through, it's something we'll live. So I invite you to keep exploring and asking questions with me. Come back to this cosmic dance again, because time, in all its mystery, always has something new to reveal. May time be on your side. See you next week. Bye.